Thank you for joining us today. Before I actually get into asking you a few questions, I think a lot of the people would like to know how and why you're running for governor of Illinois.
Well, good morning. Thanks for having me on. My name is Paul Schimpf. I'm running for Illinois governor because Illinois needs common sense conservative leadership we can trust. I spent my adult life in the United States Marine Corps, and when I hung up my uniform for the final time, that didn't change who I am. I believe you have a duty to serve your country, your state, and your community. Illinois has the talent and resources to be the strongest state in our tremendous country. Really, what we are lacking right now is leadership out of the governor's mansion. I and my running mate, future Lieutenant Governor Carolyn Schofield, are prepared to offer that leadership. We have the ideas that are going to give Illinois a new start because, frankly, the same tired rhetoric and political division is not working for our state. When you evaluate the candidates for governor and lieutenant governor, you're going to see that Carolyn and I have ideas and a background that is unmatched by anybody else running for governor. And I'm excited to be able to talk to you about that for a little bit today.
Very good. Thank you, sir. So let's just jump right into it. The first one is, of course, the big pink elephant in the room for the state of Illinois, and that's our pension fund. Currently, it stands at about 130 billion, and it's down from 144 because of investment returns. The percentage-wise, it went from 46.5% down to 39%. In the current economic environment, we can't expect positive returns every time. What can be done to manage the unfunded pensions outside of bankruptcy?
Well, the pension situation as it exists right now is completely unsustainable. It's going to take leadership and concerted action from all Illinoisans to be able to solve this problem. Unfortunately, we need to realize that the pension shortfall has been 3 decades in the making. So if somebody is telling you that they have a silver bullet or a magic beans type solution that's going to solve this problem very quickly, they're frankly selling something. The reason we are in this mess is because for a number of years, the state of Illinois, the politicians in Springfield skipped making the pension payments. And that's, in essence, they stole from the pension funds. Now, my undergraduate degree is in mechanical engineering. I'm not a
Hmm.
CPA. I'm not an accountant. I'm not an actuarial. My information that I'm going on is what was briefed to me when I was a member of the pensions working group as a state senator in Springfield. According to the experts that talked to the pensions working group, they said the number one driver for the pension shortfall is the fact that the state of Illinois did not make its pension payments. The number two driver is the compound cost of living adjustments. So if we're going to address this, it's going to have to be over time, and we're going to have to address those two causes. Now, when you talk about the fact that the state of Illinois did not make pension payments, that is something that we don't have a time machine. We can't go back and try to redo those bad choices. We're going to have to simply try to make up the shortfall, and that's going to take very tough policy choices. We have had years recently where the state of Illinois had record revenue coming in, and instead of paying in extra to try to make up for those past mistakes, we have spent all the new money that has been coming in. For instance, J.B. Pritzker's first budget. That was a year that we had the Trump economy was going
Right.
gangbusters. We had record revenue coming in. And what did the leadership of both political parties do? They approved a budget that spent nearly every last dime of the revenue that was coming in. I was one of the few Republicans that voted no on that budget. That's probably one of the proudest votes that I took in Springfield because that budget, J.B. Pritzker's first budget, increased spending across the board when we didn't have to do that, and it made it much tougher to solve our long-term financial problems. So to address the pension shortfall, we're going to have to take an all of the above solution. We're going to have to offer people buyouts. We're going to have to try to pay back the money that we shorted the pension system, but it's not something that is going to be able to be solved instantly. If we make tough choices for at least a decade, we may be able to get this under control.
So one of the things, whether the legislation or the legislators or Pritzker or maybe even past governors have a tendency to do, which is obviously cash is the major issue is they never have enough, and the easiest focus is just to increase taxes. Do you think that that's a logical option with this as well?
Absolutely not. And JB Pritzker's only solution that he seems to have for pensions or any of the problems in Illinois is to propose to increase taxes and increase spending. JB Pritzker pushed a constitutional amendment to switch us to a progressive income tax system. That was a fundamentally dishonest push, though. He was telling people, look, your taxes are going to go down, but he wasn't really completing the entire picture. That proposal would have led to increased taxes probably on everybody going down the road. Our pension shortfall, as you mentioned earlier, it was over $100 billion, depending on the estimates. I mean, I've heard some estimates as high as like $300 billion. But
Yeah,
JB
actually, I've heard
Pritzker,
that as well.
I don't. But when JB Pritzker was pushing his progressive income tax proposal, he was saying, "Well, it's not going to raise taxes because it's only going to, generate 2 billion in additional revenue coming in." That was kind of like a person that you hire to paint your house, and you ask them for an estimate, and they say, "Well, if I'm not going to tell you how much the whole thing is going to cost, but just for that little 2 foot by 2 foot square there, I won't charge you anything for that." That was the fundamental dishonesty that went into JB Pritzker's progressive tax hike amendment argument. But look, the bottom line is this: Illinois has a spending problem, not a revenue problem. I
Mhm.
voted against every single tax increase that crossed my desk as an Illinois senator. I never introduced any legislation that would expand the scope of government or give government new taxing powers. I'm the only governor candidate in the race that can make that statement. I've got a legislative record, and it's an anti tax legislative record. It's a reduced scope of government legislative record. Nobody else has that same legislative record that can match mine.
Very good. So let's go a little bit away from the fiscal part of it. The parental notification ends for teens seeking abortions. In December 2021, Governor Pritzker signed a bill ending the state's last pro life law by allowing minor girls to obtain an abortion without their parents' knowledge. Given other states tending to a more conservative view with heartbeat laws, what should be done with Illinois on this front?
Well, I'm pro-life, and one of the advantages, one of the reasons that I tell people that they should consider supporting me as their Republican governor candidate is I have a legislative record. 8 years ago, I was running for Illinois Attorney General. There was another statewide candidate who I was in the room and heard with my own ears. I heard when he said, "I am pro-life and I'm opposed to illegal immigration." When that candidate became Governor Rauner, he
Mm,
didn't follow up on those promises that he made to people. And my point is not to trash Bruce Rauner. I tried my darndest to get him reelected against J.B. Pritzker. My point in telling that story is talk is cheap. And you absolutely do not know where people really stand unless they have a voting record and you can see how they voted. I am pro life. I have a 100% pro life voting record. The state of Illinois right now, our abortion laws are radical, extreme, and frankly embarrassing. In Illinois, a preborn child can be aborted up until the moment of live birth for any reason, no matter how repulsive, like gender selection, and it's paid for by taxpayer dollars. that is extreme and out of the main, that is a national outlier. And when I am governor, I will sign any legislation that moves us more in line with the mainstream.
So if you had that legislation did come across your desk, would you have any issues with like either line item vetoes or vetoing the whole bill in general?
Well, I wish Illinois had a line item veto. I don't think we do not right now.
Yeah,
That's
we
a
don't.
reform that would certainly help our state. But I intend to use my veto power as governor, not only for bills that I disagree with, but I'm also going to hold the General Assembly accountable. When I'm governor, it's not going to be business as usual anymore under the Capitol Dome. One of the things that I've been saying for a year now is that the truth is not afraid of transparency, and solution doesn't require silence. What I mean by
Right.
that is if you have a good idea, you should not be afraid of debate. You should not be afraid of legislative oversight. One of the pledges that I make to the people of Illinois is if legislation is not passed in a fully transparent manner, it will get a veto from me whether I agree with the legislation or disagree with it. Our process is that important, and really, to me, the most egregious example of that was the Criminal Justice Reform Bill, House Bill 3653, which was the last vote I took as a state senator. It was in the lame duck session in January of 2021, but that was a bill that was negotiated with the law enforcement community, kept in the dark, and the final version of it was crafted overnight. Nobody even knew what they were voting on when it passed at 4 a.m. in the morning in the Illinois Senate, and the bill had never had a hearing. So it was an absolute travesty, and that's the type of legislation that deserves a veto just on the basis of process, not necessarily on content, although the content was bad as well. But if we're going to trust our government again, we have to govern in a trustworthy manner. And that's something that the governor of Illinois can enforce through his veto pen. I will not sign any legislation. I will veto all legislation that is not passed in a transparent manner.
Very good. With the general impression from bipartisan polls that elections have been compromised in recent years across the country, what should be done in Illinois to solidify election integrity in our state?
Well, all right, so I am I absolutely believe that we should have voter ID in order to vote. There are a lot of political issues where you have legitimate policy arguments on both sides of the issue.
Right.
Voter ID is not one of those. There is no reason why you cannot show an ID to vote. If you can, show an ID to get on a plane or do all these other activities, you can certainly show an ID to vote, which is one of our most fundamental rights. We have to have integrity in our elections. It's important that we make it so that people can vote. We want to increase participation, but at the same time, we want to make sure that people can trust the results in our elections. So the first way of doing that is by voter ID. I don't know how soon we're going to be able to implement that in Illinois. One thing that we can do right now, though, and this is mainly being done through the Republican Party, is we need to train poll watchers. We need to train election judges. We need to hire attorneys to be ready to litigate some of these issues. The other thing that we can do for election integrity is sign up with the Republican Party to be a precinct committeeman. If you are a precinct committeeman, you have access to the voter rolls in your precinct. You can actually go out and check whether people are still living at some of these addresses where people are registered to vote. So really the biggest thing we can do, we do need voter ID. I support that. I can't guarantee that that's going to happen because that has to go through the Illinois General Assembly, but that's something I will push for as governor. But right now, the Republican Party is doing a good job of training election judges, poll watchers, and election attorneys.
Very good. So within the in the business world or the corporate world, it is a regular practice to audit your books annually, especially among larger corporations that might have public holdings. Would you support forensic audits for elections for federal, state, local elections as governor?
Absolutely, I would. I mean, what, Tell me a process that is more important than our elections. This is simply the most fundamental process for our democracy. Why wouldn't we want a forensic audit to make sure that that it is as accurate as possible? As I said before, the truth is not afraid of transparency. This issue, election integrity, is important enough that everybody should welcome a forensic audit because if it turns out that everything was on the up and up, well, then we will know and people can have confidence in their elections. So that's something where I was asked about this on the record a number of months ago. And, my answer then, and it is now, is yes, I do support forensic audits.
Very good. When looking at the process of voting, would you push for, in terms of method of voting, continue the use of mixed paper ballots and machines, or just paper ballot?
In response to your question about the best type of ballot, uh, I prefer a paper ballot in Monroe County. The way I've been voting for ever since I got back to Illinois from my service in the Marine Corps is you use a machine. That machine spits out a paper ballot. You review it, and then you put it in the ballot box. That to me is a great way. I think it works, and I have complete confidence in our elections in Monroe County where I vote.
As far as the elected officials themselves, do you support term limits?
Absolutely, I'm a supporter of term limits. I believe that public service should be a temp job as opposed to a career. I think it's interesting to note that I'm not a state senator anymore. The reason I'm not a state senator is when I would have had to run for reelection in 2020, at the time that I would have had to file that paperwork to run, I was under consideration for a federal judge position. I was President Trump's top choice to be a federal judge in the Southern District of Illinois, and I felt like I had no business running for reelection if I was angling for a different job. I think we as voters deserve candidates that are committed to the offices that we're running for. I think that term limits is a good thing and that we would have new ideas coming in. I would like to see the Republican Party of Illinois adopt term limits by policy. In the military, and I spent my adult life in the United States Marine Corps. I'd gone to the Naval Academy and then was in the Marine Corps for 20 years after that. But the military has an up or out policy. You're either getting promoted up or you have to get out. I would like to see the Illinois Republican Party adopt term limits by policy, where we say, look, Republican candidates, you're elected to an office, you serve 3 terms, and then after 3 terms, you either have to run for a leadership position or you have to run for a higher elected office. That is something that I would like to see the Illinois Republican Party enforce, not rely on the state election laws to have that in place. But term limits is a good thing. I support that. I've co-sponsored legislation that would establish term limits in Illinois.
Very good. Let's switch directions a little bit here, and we're going to go towards energy. With the push from the Biden administration and radical progressive interests, a major platform for the side is to increase green energy. How would you handle the energy situation for the state of Illinois?
I'm all of the above when it comes to energy. We need to develop all the resources we have. We need to pursue alternate forms of energy. The problem with what is being done in Illinois is we're seeing a lot of environmental virtue signaling. The reality is what is done in Illinois is not going to have an impact on climate change, especially when China and India are producing new coal-fired plants every day. So what they are trying to do in Illinois is going to make our energy more expensive and less reliable. So, really, this is just environmental virtue signaling. Had I been still in office, I would have voted no on the energy bill. I believe that we need to support all forms of energy development.
Illinois losses. Of course, with the massive amounts of population running from Illinois the past 2 years, and a number of corporations and manufacturing fleeing as well to more business-friendly environments, what would you do as governor to counter that trend?
Well, just before I answer the question, I will just make as a side note, um, population growth or loss is the ultimate economic metric for our state. I mean, if
Yep.
you can talk about unemployment, you can talk about GDP. It's really population, either growth or loss, that tells you how we're doing as a state. And the reality is, unless people want to come to Illinois or people want to stay in Illinois to either grow their families or businesses, we cannot solve the problems that we face. And that's why it was just, I thought it was, a dereliction of duty for JB Pritzker to give a State of the State speech a couple days ago and not even address the fact that Illinois is continuing to hemorrhage population. Because if you're talking about what's the state of Illinois, how are we doing? You have to address that. That is the elephant in the room. And in 2021, Illinois lost 114,000 residents. That is one of I think that was like the third worst in the nation. So we are continuing to hemorrhage population, and that's really a damning indictment on JB Pritzker's leadership, just in terms of how the state is going, and then just the fact that he would not even acknowledge it in his state of the state speech. I mean,
Right.
real leadership means you have to be honest with people and you have to level with them about the problems. And to for JB Pritzker to give a state of the state speech and not talk about population loss, that shows what a failed leader he is. People are leaving Illinois for a number of reasons. Illinois is probably the one of the least business-friendly states in our nation. It's also a nation where people are, or a state where people are being driven out because of property taxes. As governor, I will do two things. First, I'm going to insist on some real property tax reform. I've been involved in politics now for 8 years. I got out of the Marine Corps in 2013, moved my family back to Illinois. I ran for Illinois Attorney General. People were talking about property taxes back then. It's been 8 years. Not a darn thing has been done of substance. This is something that's going to require leadership from the governor to address. And what I would like to propose, what I am proposing, is that we change the way we handle property taxes in Illinois. I don't think you should be able to have your property reassessed unless its title changes or the zoning changes. To me, one of the property taxes are a huge threat. You can have somebody that is on fixed income, and then the assessors go in and increase the value of their property, and their property taxes grow up. Or go up, and that's something that threatens people's financial security. So we need to take bold, significant action on property taxes. I can't make property taxes go down as governor. That's not something I have the ability to do. But as governor, I will lead and I will make a fundamental change to the way we use property taxes in Illinois. The other thing that I will do to address the loss of population in Illinois is we simply have to be more business friendly. And it's our administrative regulations that are choking the life out of our state. It's the agencies that are putting red tape and making it difficult for businesses to grow and expand in Illinois. One of the qualifications that I have that nobody else, running for governor has, is I was on JCAR, the Joint Committee for Administrative Rules. I was on JCAR for 2 years. So I understand how the Illinois Administrative Procedures Act works and how the administrative agencies promulgate rules. And that's going to be a major focus of mine as governor, is reining in our administrative agencies, the agencies that are taking away our fundamental freedoms and choking the life out of our small business. I have the qualifications to do that, and nobody else does.
There are 15 states that levy either no income tax or a hybrid income tax just on investment income and interest. These states have had success attracting workers and industry to their states. Would you support such an effort in Illinois?
Well, my understanding of the question is, you're asking if I would support doing away with the income tax in Illinois.
Exactly.
That's something I would be open to. I would entertain that. But that's something, frankly, I don't think I don't think we're going to see that getting through the Illinois General Assembly. I mean, what we have to do is we have to exercise some spending restraint right now. When there was the debate going on about switching to a progressive income tax instead of a flat tax, that was J.B. Pritzker's constitutional amendment approach. One of the things that I said then, and I will say it now, is it was kind of like when you're arguing about flat tax versus progressive tax, really you're kind of missing the big threat, which is that our state has an insatiable spending problem. Unless we get our spending under control, we're not going to be able to get our financial house in order. And it's the spending it's the runaway spending that is what is killing us as far as our long-term fiscal security.
And one of the things in my past career was investment and having companies come to the state of Illinois. And one of the things that a lot of times put me at a disadvantage in trying to attract some of the manufacturing in Illinois was uh, the right to work status. So in the state of Illinois, there is no right to work law. The union security clause should still be intact, though there are contractual exceptions. With many manufacturers looking at states with a formal right to work legislation, would you support this action or not?
Well, I believe that right to work is a misnomer. In Illinois, what we have right now is people can, they don't, you don't have to join a union. You can opt out of having, even if you join the union, you can still opt out of having your fees used for political purposes. What you can't do, though, is you can't be what's called legally a free rider. If you are a have a job that is represented by a collective bargaining unit, that union has to provide services to you regardless of whether you're a member of the union or not. And from a legal standpoint, if somebody is providing services to you, especially if they're obligated to do so by law, you have a law to compensate them for that. So I'm opposed to right to work. I think that it's a misnomer. I'm a centrist on union issues. Both my parents were union members. They were public school teachers. When I was in Springfield, I had a legislative record where one of the radical left-leaning unions, gave me a 35%. Was what they scored me. I think if it had been a more centrist union, like maybe one of the operating engineers, I would have come in at about 50%. The idea is, when the unions approached me about something, I listened. If I thought they were right, I voted with them. If I thought they were wrong, I voted against them. So I'm a centrist on union issues. I think that, unions have been responsible for some of the, good changes in our society in terms of better working conditions. So I'm not reflexively anti-union. I think we need to listen to what both sides have to say.
But on a corporate basis, for attracting industry into the state, which Illinois is just sorely lacking right now, wouldn't wouldn't supporting a right to work strategy be prudent, considering that really the state has very little to offer as far as attracting industry right now?
Oh, I disagree with that. I think we have a tremendous amount to offer in terms of just the talent, the resources, and the industry that we have here. What makes people not want to come to Illinois is they realize that there's been no change in our trajectory of higher taxes and higher spending, and also the administrative burdens associated with starting up a business here. I think those are much more of an impediment to businesses coming to Illinois than a change to the right to work laws.
In November 2022, the people of the state of Illinois will be voting on an amendment to the Constitution that will permanently ban any right to work legislation. This is I guess, the opposite direction of what you're saying. The states with right to work legislation fare better economically than those who don't. Would you support House Joint Resolution Amendment 34, which is the banning of any right to work legislation?
I haven't looked at that resolution, and you're kind of characterizing it one way. I don't know whether that characterization is accurate or not. So
Hmm.
I have not looked at that amendment myself. That came through after I was no longer a state senator. So I'm not prepared to answer that question at this point.
Okay, very good. So, Healthcare Right of Conscience Act. In November 2021, J.B. Pritzker signed Senate Bill 1169 into law, basically bypassing the judicial branch of government and limiting the people of Illinois to handle their own health care. As governor, how would you handle this perceived overstep by the executive branch?
Well, I think this whole election that's coming up can really be boiled down to one issue in one word, which is trust. Uh, who do we trust as a society to handle our society's wealth? Do we trust individuals and businesses, or do we, want to have the government take all of our wealth and redistribute it? Who do we trust to make education and healthcare decisions for children? Do we trust parents or do we trust the government? I think we trust parents. And then lastly, who do we trust to make their own medical decisions, the decisions about, what medical treatment do I want to receive? I think we as a society should trust individuals, not the government, to be making that decision. So I was opposed to what J.B. Pritzker did as far as gutting the Conscience Act. As governor, I will insist that we give people the trust that they deserve. This is something where you look at our U.S. Constitution that talks about the powers that are not specifically given to the national government should be reserved for the states and the people. This election really boils down to who do we want to trust? Do we want to trust the government or do we want to trust the people of Illinois? I think our Illinois government has certainly squandered any amount of trust that we have given it. So I support individuals to make their own healthcare decisions. I'm opposed to both mask and vaccine mandates.
So, given that, downstate judge halted mask mandates in 170 school districts. Was it last night?
That was
This
last
is,
night. That was some welcome news
yeah.
that came in. Now, my I very briefly, I skimmed the ruling, but what I took away from it was, it was halted because not because the state of Illinois didn't have the power to do it. This is what the judge said, but she said that they had not given enough due process rights to the people that objected. So she halted the mandates, but it was based on them not complying with the procedures of with the process of the Administrative Procedures Act. So, it was a victory. It was, a fairly narrow victory. And then the other problem is in court cases, it's not the first ruling that counts. It's the last ruling. There have been individuals that have won at the county level, the local courts, and then they lose on appeal and they say, well, I won my case. Well, no, you didn't. If you win at the first level and then lose on appeal, that's kind of like the St. Louis baseball Cardinals saying that they won the wild card game against the Dodgers because they were ahead after 3 innings. That's not how it works. It's the final court ruling that counts. So we will be watching it closely, and we'll see what happens at the appellate level, and then possibly the Illinois Supreme Court level. But what is unequivocally good about this, though, is people are going to understand how important these judge elections are. And, there are seats on the Illinois Supreme Court that are up for grabs this election. The Republicans have an opportunity to take control of the Illinois Supreme Court. And if the Republicans can do that, that would really truly, mean that we would have, a limitations on government power and possibly a redraw of legislative maps, because there's no way that the legislative maps that came out and were signed by Governor J.B. Pritzker, breaking a promise, by the way, yet again, but there is no way that those legislative maps could withstand scrutiny from a Republican Illinois Supreme Court.
Okay. So let's switch direction a little bit. Immigration. With the amount of human trafficking, drug smuggling, and other issues in the southern border, Illinois passed the Illinois Way Forward Act restricting how law enforcement in the state would collaborate with federal immigration agents. Also, the act closes all detention centers in Illinois. As governor, would you or could you or what should be done in retrospect of this act?
Well, as governor, I will have my administrative agencies take a look at that law and what we are allowed to do. If there's if there are some openings where we can still cooperate with federal law enforcement. I'm absolutely opposed to what that act did. I want people to be able to come to our country legally. I think our country is stronger when we have people that want to come to America, work hard, assimilate, and be free. That is what this country is all about. But that act prohibiting our law enforcement in Illinois from working with federal immigration and customs enforcement, absolutely opposed to that. It's ridiculous. One of the other things that J.B. Pritzker did very early on in his administration. This is something that has been forgotten by some people because of the pandemic, but he had ordered that the Department of Corrections was going to release felons, who were in our penal system. If they were illegal immigrants and felons, he was just going to release them into the general population. He wasn't going to have them turned over to immigration and customs enforcement. And we're talking about felons here. We're not talking about low-level criminals. So J.B. Pritzker is just absolutely wrong on immigration. Could not disagree with him more on this.
Very good. Let's take a look at education a little bit more. Illinois has one of the highest property taxes in America. It also has an education distribution percentage near the top as well. As a result of this investment, Illinois schools rank near the bottom in skills testing and college entrance testing. What can be done to fix a very little return on investment as far as education is concerned in Illinois?
Well, when it comes to investment in schools, this is something that we need to, we that is a priority for all of us. One of the things that unites us is we all want our kids to have a better life than we had, and a part of that is a good education system. I do think, though, in light of the pandemic and the loss of control that parents had to be able to get their kids in school, I think we need to give parents options so that they can control their education again. One of the things that my campaign did and nobody else did was back in June, we proposed a Illinois Parents Bill of Rights. This issue, parents' rights, is something that I've been focused on really since I was a state senator. A lot of other Republicans are talking about it now in light of the Republican governor victory in Virginia, and that's a good thing. The parents' rights issue is, that's the issue that's going to win the general election for us in November of 2022. But we have to empower parents. We need to make sure that our funding for schools is being done the right way. I do think we need to try to start paring down some of the administrative costs that we face in schools. There are frankly, I think there are way too many superintendents right now. I'm not in favor of consolidating school districts necessarily because parents don't want to put their kindergartner on a bus ride for an hour. But there is no reason that we need multiple superintendents, drawing huge paychecks at a bunch of different school districts. So I'm in favor of consolidating administration. I also want to give parents more control over their kids' education. I believe, and this is part of the New Start proposal that Carolyn and I are making, is that any type of education dollars that are education assistance that is provided by the state of Illinois to a school district, I think curriculum transparency ought to be a requirement in order for you to get state funding assistance in Illinois. So this is something, education is something that unites all of us in Illinois, but it is also something where we have to do a better job, and there's certainly room for improvement.
Even though schools are not reaching an even average standards, they are pushing through radical progressive policies such as the 1619 Project, inclusive of critical race theory, early sexualization of children, and gender misrepresentation narratives. How can the governor help reverse this trend?
Well, the governor is in charge of the Illinois State Board of Education. Now, I apologize if I go on a 5 minute long answer here, because this is something that really uh, goes to the heart of why I'm running for governor. But the Illinois State Board of Education, which is made up of unelected bureaucrats appointed by the governor, has forgotten that its mission should be to support local school districts. Instead, the Illinois State Board of Education is seeking to supplant them. And it's the Illinois State Board of Education that has really tied the hands of our local school boards and really put them in a difficult position. One of the things that I said so much when I was an Illinois senator that people got tired of it. I'd get up to speak and they'd roll their eyes because they knew that what was going to come out of my mouth had come out so many other times, is I repeatedly said, look, we in the Illinois Senate are not, nor should we be, a 59-member school board. Education decisions need to be made by parents and local education leaders, not by the Illinois General Assembly. The Illinois General Assembly should be providing them with the resources and the tools to make sure that they can give our kids the best education possible. But it should be local school boards who are both accessible and accountable to parents who make these decisions. Now, back to your original question, the Illinois State Board of Education has absolutely gone off the rails in terms of promoting social engineering. The biggest example of that is the culturally responsive teaching standards that were passed not by the General Assembly, but they were put out by the Illinois State Board of Education. These teaching standards basically injected socialism into the teacher certification process in Illinois. And when I am governor, the first action that I will take after I'm sworn in as governor is I will pick up the phone and I will call the state superintendent of schools, whether it's JB Pritzker's holdover or whether it's somebody that is, that is new, that is coming in under me. But I will say, look, pull back the culturally responsive teaching standards. I want that pulled back for an outright rescission or a rewrite to get it back to what it was before, where we're worried about the ability of teachers to actually teach rather than indoctrinate. So this is something that the Illinois governor can do a tremendous amount of work on, because the Illinois governor is in charge of all the administrative agencies in Illinois, and it's the administrative agencies that are both subverting the rights of parents and individuals, but also choking the life out of the small business in our state. That's a qualification, that experience that I have that nobody else does.
Very good. So now we're going to switch direction one more time. And with the Chicago violence, this seems to be it's a topic that is largely just ignored, and we'll address it here. So, with the continued violence on the south side of Chicago and Cook County hitting all-time highs over 1,000 murders just recently, what would you do as governor to help stop the violence and terror of families that are experiencing this in Chicago?
As governor, I would do three things, and it's amazing that JB Pritzker once again misses the mark on this in his State of the State speech that he gave earlier this week. He talked about spending some more money. We're gonna throw money at the problem, and really, what we need to do are three things. First, we need to have a governor who is unequivocal in his support of our law enforcement community. Unless we have a strong law enforcement community that knows they are supported by the political leadership of Illinois, we cannot make our streets and communities safe. I mean, it's that simple. It's our law enforcement personnel are the ones that allow us to have the rule of law. They are what separate us from complete anarchy. We need an Illinois governor who understands and will publicly say that, look, our law enforcement personnel represent everything that is best about our state and about our country, and they put their lives on the line every day. They deserve a governor who unequivocally has their back. I'm not going to be out cuffing and stuffing people with the police, but I am going to go out and show solidarity with them because it's important that our law enforcement community knows that their governor has their back. That's the first thing I'm going to do. The second thing I will do as governor is I will ensure that our law enforcement communities have the necessary training and equipment to do their job. And if they don't, if there are bills that defund police departments, I will veto them. The our law enforcement community needs a governor who is going to be their watchdog, and I'm going to keep an eye on the law enforcement funding. The third and final thing that I will do as governor is I'm going to hold myself accountable for the violence in this state. I'm amazed that JB Pritzker has the gall to run for reelection when our public safety has deteriorated so badly under his watch. And I'll put a marker down right now. When I'm governor, if I cannot significantly reduce the levels of violence in our state, I will hold myself accountable and I will not run for reelection. We need leaders that are going to hold themselves accountable. I have the background to bring stakeholders together. I'm the only candidate running for governor who was a high level prosecutor. I was the head prosecutor for the Marine Corps' Western Recruiting Region. I was not a defense attorney, I was a prosecutor. I worked everything from attempted murder, drugs, rape, sexual assault, bad checks, you name it, I prosecuted it. I also was the lead American attorney advisor to the Iraqi prosecutors in the Saddam trial in Iraq. I have the background as a prosecutor where I can hold Kim Foxx accountable. I can say, hey, look, we're going to come together. We're going to figure out a solution. And if I can't get that done, if I cannot do something about the level of violence in our state, I will hold myself accountable and not run for reelection. Frankly, I am embarrassed that JB Pritzker has the chutzpah to run for reelection again right now after our state has deteriorated so badly under his watch.
So, in that event where the governor would eliminate violence from that area, it was even I think Trump who even offered National Guard assistance, or he even said he would get involved at one point. Is that even a true option the governor should consider as far as helping Chicago, which is using the National Guard?
Well, it's not is not realistic to have the National Guard be hunting down criminals. That is,
Mm.
that's a little bit of political rhetoric. What the National Guard can do is the National Guard can provide administrative assistance to law enforcement, but really it's a case of the governor needs to bring the stakeholders together and figure out, okay, why are we not prosecuting people? Why are people being arrested and then just released again? The governor needs to put his prestige on the line. The governor needs to put his credibility on the line, and that's something that JB Pritzker has not done. I mean, this was even to the point where you had some elected Chicago Democrats who have been saying JB Pritzker is MIA on this. He's not leading on this issue. He's missing in action. And, that's really, I've talked a lot about the Pritzker leadership deficit. There is no more glaring example of a lack of leadership, than JB Pritzker's absence on the issue of trying to make our streets safer. And he has no solution to this. His only solution is to spend more money, and that's not going to solve our problems.
In reading through the Constitution, I've yet to find language in support of the FOID card. Do you support the removal of this card for the citizens of Illinois?
I do, and this was something when I was a state senator, I co-sponsored legislation to abolish the FOID card. That legislation we've, I think I co-sponsored that legislation my first year as a state senator, and then every year thereafter. That's something that's a proposal that has been around, for a number of years. Uh, there is nobody that has a better Second Amendment voting record than me as an elected official in Springfield. I've long called for the abolishment of the FOID card. I don't see what it accomplishes other than making it very difficult for law-abiding citizens to execute their constitutional rights.
So, in the event, there's been several states recently just became constitutional carry states. Would you support Illinois becoming one of those states as well?
Well, the problem with gun violence is never it's not being the crimes are not being committed by people that are upholding the law. I'd like to challenge anybody to show me a mass murder that was committed by a law-abiding citizen. It's just it's the criminals that are doing this. So why do we need to continue punishing our people from exercising their constitutional rights? I'd certainly be open to considering the proposal.
Very good. So, I think that's all I have for today. So, my first comment is I'd like to thank you for your service, number one. And number two, for sitting down for, I'm not sure how long we talked today, but thank you for sitting down with Sat Media, myself. And I truly appreciate talking with you today.
Well, you're welcome. Thanks for having me on, and I do always appreciate the acknowledgement of my service. You're welcome. Our country has a lot of challenges that we're facing right now, but one of the things that we are doing so much better on compared to the past is how we treat our veterans and our active duty military. It was really disgraceful the way they were treated in the 60s and 70s. Our country does a much better job of that now, and that's something that I think we can all be proud of. I really do appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak with you today. I enjoyed our conversation and happy to come back in at some other point.
Very good. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it.
Yep.
So,